Hello everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. If you're coming back, good to see you again. Today we're going to talk about an incident that occurred in 1978 on a deep sea driller rig in the port of Singapore. This rig was called the Byford Dolphin, and in my opinion, what happened in 1978 at 4 o'clock in the morning is one of the most horrible disasters that's ever occurred in a body of water. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this deep sea driller and exactly what happened and what caused a group of 5 or 6 men to lose their lives. So yeah, if you're interested in that, stay tuned and we will start talking about that shortly. Before we go into the specs of the Byford Dolphin itself, I just want to talk about semi-submersibles in general. Something that's interesting about them is they actually have the ability to be moved from one place to another if needed. So it's not completely cemented into the sea floor. Instead, what they use is what they call ballasted watertight pontoons. So they're kind of just these little boats that are secured to the bottom of the water or bottom of the ocean so that the site doesn't get moved around and all that kind of stuff. Another interesting aspect of a semi-submersible is because it's halfway in the water, it is significantly less impacted by waves, just water movement in general, which, as you can assume, is probably a pretty big deal when you're working on the ocean. If you've ever been in a boat during waves or choppy water in general, it's not fun. I can say for certain it's not fun. So with that, we'll go into the Byford Dolphin itself. I'm done talking about just overall things because obviously there's so many other semi-submersibles other than the Byford Dolphin. We're just talking about this one in particular today. So now we can go into the specs real quick, and then we'll go on to the exact tragedy that happened and why this happened. So let's go. The overall length of the Byford Dolphin is only about 355 feet, so not a huge vessel, definitely not like a warship or like anything like that. It's not huge. The breadth, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to skip over that. Maximum drill depth. The maximum drill depth is up to 3.8 miles. The minimum water depth is 1,500 feet. So as we said, anything over 1,700 feet is semi-submersible is required. The deck load was about 3,025 tons, and the crew quarters was about 102 people. So not a huge site and not a ton of people on this site taking care of everything that needs to be taken care of. Now that we're done with that, let me talk a little bit about saturation diving because that will come into play here very soon. So let's go into that. Saturation diving is going to be a very, very important piece of information for this story. So I want to go into great detail about it really quick so that when we get to the incident, we know exactly why this happened and what the mistakes were. So basically, saturation diving, the definition of it is where you stay at any given depth for long enough for your body to have absorbed the maximum amount of gas. So basically, you're becoming just as pressurized as the water that is around you. I think we are at on land above water, we're I think 1 ATM or atmosphere. I think when you go all the way down there, it's all the way up to 9. So as you can assume, that's a huge range, and if you don't saturate yourself to that, you're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to do anything. As we'll see a little bit later, there's something called the bends, where if your body is not saturated well enough, you'll start having a bunch of different issues occur, and the biggest issue of all of that is you just die. So saturation diving became a huge, huge part of deep sea work in general because you don't have to go up and down, back and forth all the time. So basically, in saturation diving, after you're saturated to that necessary pressure, you just stay down there, or you stay in that pressure until your job's done. So that could be 2 weeks, that could be a month, that could be 2 months. It's really like up in the air. One of the positives of this job is you get paid a bunch of money. You get a really, really good paycheck. But as we'll see, it's very dangerous and you can very easily lose your life. The way that they saturate the divers to this from 1 to 9 atmosphere is actually pretty interesting. They slowly pump a mixture of gases into the chamber that these people are in. Most likely the diving bell. But basically, these gases that they're pushing in are a mix of, I think it's helium and oxygen. So heliox, that's the combination. Basically, you need to be saturated with those two gases in order to really get to that 9 atmosphere. I'm not exactly sure what the exact scientific reasoning is for that, but I think that as you saturate more and more, you need to have less and less oxygen because obviously there's no oxygen underwater. So basically they get saturated to the point where they're ready to go down there, and then they finally start their work. And that's where we can start going into exactly what these people do, exactly how important everything is to go to plan, and exactly how everything did not go to plan on that horrible evening at 4 o'clock in the morning. So let's go on to that, and I'm going to take a quick break because my head is kind of spinning, so I will be back. So basically, after these divers are saturated to that 9 ATM or atmospheres, they cannot deviate from that ATM whatsoever. I talked about it earlier. I'm going to go into this really quickly before we go over exactly how everything's set up. There's something called the bends or decompression sickness, where basically it forces that nitrogen that is just like around you, but you have that heliox in your body, so the nitrogen can't really. It's a safe level of nitrogen, should I say? But if you quickly come out of that saturation and you do decompress too quickly, there's a few things that can happen. You can get really dizzy. You can get muscle fatigue. Something more intense than muscle fatigue that you can get is you can get paralyzed in certain places. But the worst case scenario, if you decompress too quickly, is all of that nitrogen builds up in your blood, and your blood literally starts to boil, and you just explode. A little bit of foreshadowing. We're going to see that a little bit later. But yeah, so that's the bends. So basically, like I said, after they're saturated to this 9 ATM, they are unable to be unsaturated until their job is finished. And even when their job's finished, they need to very, very slowly decompress and get back to that 1 ATM, which can take weeks to months, because it takes, I think, for every hour or two that you're down in that pressure, it takes maybe a day for you to come back up. Anyways, so they get saturated, and then from this point until they're finished, there's only there's only 2 places that they will be. One place will be in the diving bell, which is the big container that basically raises or takes you down from the rig all the way down to where you need to work on the seafloor. The way that this works is actually really interesting. When it's called a diving bell, that's for good reason, because it literally looks like a big bell. And when it gets lowered all the way down to the floor of the ocean, it basically acts as a dome. So there's no water seeping in, so there's no need for any diving costumes or anything like that. So you can basically just work unbothered. So you're either down working on the floor of the ocean, or you're up on the rig in the living quarters, which has also been pressurized to that 9 ATM. So as we'll see, there's a few very important steps when transferring from the diving bell into the living quarters in order to prevent any sort of decompression. So that's kind of how it works. There's like 4 people inside that have been decompressed. So 2 go down and work for 12 hours, and they come up, and the other 2 take over and go down for another 12 hours. So now we can kind of go into exactly what happened with this crew and exactly how shit went so wrong, because honestly, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's kind of up for interpretation what happened with this incident, whether it was a miscommunication or someone jumping the gun or anything like that. So with that, trigger warning real quick, we're going to be talking about a lot of claustrophobic stuff. We're going to be talking about a lot of death and a lot of pain. So yeah, just quick viewer discretion advised. And with that, let's get on to the meat and potatoes of this story, because everything up to this has kind of just been built up. So let's talk about the crew real quick. So it is a crew of 6 people. Like I said, there's 4 divers that are under this pressure, and then there are 2 people outside in the regular pressure, and these are called dive tenders. So basically, the job of a dive tender is to successfully transfer the divers from the diving bell through the tube that goes into the living quarters and then into the living quarters. There's all of these rules and things that are put in place. We're going to go into that in literally just a second. But real quick, I just wanted to give out the names of these people. So the 4 divers, unfortunately, that were killed were Edwin Arthur Coward, Roy P. Lucas, Bjorn Bergensen, and Truls Hellevik. And then the Norwegian dive tenders that were outside were William Crammond and Martin Saunders. Crawford and Crammond and Saunders, they have some of the most important jobs throughout this entire thing, and they're the ones that kind of drop the ball, if you want to say it. The exact routine that these dive tenders need to follow goes as follows. 1, close the diving bell door. So this is after the people have successfully left the diving bell and they've gone into the chambers. So 1, close the diving bell. 2, slightly increase the pressure in the diving bell so that you can remove it at some point. So you just slightly decrease that pressure. And actually, decreasing the pressure is supposed to tighten the seal on it, preventing any sort of decompression. 3, close chamber 1 door, which is the door that is the entryway to the living quarters itself. Number 4, slowly, and I mean very, very slowly, depressurize the trunk. The trunk is that little hallway that goes from the diving bell into the living quarters. And then finally, number 5, open the clamp and separate the diving bell. So after you've depressurized everything and all the doors are securely shut to prevent any sort of decompression, then you can remove the clamp and separate the diving bell from the living quarters itself. So that's basically how it's supposed to go. This is some foreshadowing, because obviously something happened, so this was not followed to a T. But that is just kind of the basic way that the dive tenders follow these rules, or help out the divers, whatever. And they've probably done this hundreds of times, so it would not be something that would be too complicated. It should be pretty straightforward. All right, now we can get into exactly what happened on that awful morning of November 5th, 1983. I will preface this really quick. I did my absolute best throughout this video to do research, but then kind of put stuff into my own words. I'm going to still try to do this at this final part, but I will let you guys know that I do have an article open on my second monitor, because it just does a really good job of describing all the details. So I will be kind of pulling from that every once in a while, but I'm going to try to tell the story as well as I can understand it. Okay, so with that, on November 5th, 1983, an accident resulting in sudden decompression of 4 divers from 9 ATM to 1 ATM occurs on board of the Byford Dolphin. It's around 4 o'clock in the morning, and Bergensen and Hellevik have been working down on the seafloor for about 12 hours straight. So they are coming back up so they can be relieved by Crammond and Saunders. So they're coming up from the diving bell around 4 o'clock in the morning. Everything's going fine so far. So far, so good. They come up to the diving bell, or come up from the diving bell to the trunk, which connects the diving bell to the living quarters. And in a weird freak accident, I'm not exactly sure how this happens. In the process of making sure that nothing decompresses or the saturation is staying at where it needs to be, one of the bell tenders outside is miscommunicated to and detaches the lock on the bell before it is before the living quarters is completely sealed off. So basically, as we've like kind of gone into a lot, this is bad, right? Like that's not good. We're not supposed to be quickly decompressed from 9 ATM to 1 ATM, at least not quickly, like I just said. So what happens is in an instant, like in literally like half a second, this pressure, the depressurization that's occurred, makes the diving bell shoot off from the docking station at huge speeds, like slamming into both Crammon and Saunders, who are the tenders. Saunders was killed immediately. Crammon somehow survived, but he was severely injured. We cannot really say too much for everybody else inside. Of course, Ferguson, Coward, and Lucas are all killed instantly just because of this crazy atmosphere change. Like we were talking about, they get the bends in the worst way possible, and their blood boils, and they just immediately die. Unfortunately, Hellevick did not have the same outcome because he was the closest to the hatch that was connecting the tunnel to the living quarters. In this mass depressurization, the door gets wedged, it gets stuck. So basically, there's just like a small crescent shape on the corner of the door where it's not closed. Basically, and I'm trying to be as detailed about this as possible, I will, again, I'll put this up on screen for anybody who's curious, but Hellevick is pulled through this tiny little crescent opening in a matter of like half a second. And I don't think I need to really explain this to you. You can use your imagination. But being pulled through a tiny little crescent door jam area with a full body, that's not good. That's not good. So what ends up happening to Hellevick is his body just gets like annihilated. Just organs and all over the place, and he's just been like basically just crushed to death. I don't think he could really feel anything. Like I said, it's super quick. But yeah, so in the autopsy and all this kind of stuff, there's just bones and organs and just entrails just all over the place because he was pulled through this super tiny entrance. I would be cautious to go look at any of the autopsy reports. There are video or pictures, I should say, but they are very gruesome. So do with that what you will. But yeah, so basically, 5 people were brutally killed. 1 person survived, but he was severely injured. I don't think that he would ever be able to recover from that. I think he broke his spine. I think he broke a bunch of other stuff. What they found, I'm just remembering this, is even though Crammon was alive, he was halfway under the diving bell itself. So he was basically crushed by this thing. It's kind of a miracle he didn't die. But yeah, so horrible disaster. But it's just, I don't know. I mean, I was going to say something there, but I don't even really know what to say. It's just a freak accident, I guess. And with that, we have kind of come to the end of this story. Obviously, this was a horrible thing that happened, just a miscommunication. It's kind of haunting to think about exactly how easy things can go awry and how just not built people are for the ocean. Something that I have been afraid of for a long time is the deep sea in general. I do not like the idea of things down there that I can't see. That's not my it's not my place. Like, I'm not going to be able to swim quicker than these animals or fish or whatever. So yeah, it's kind of haunting to just think about people that do these kind of jobs for us daily. I mean, we couldn't drive our cars. We couldn't have electricity. We couldn't have internet. All these things are being transported on the ocean floor. So it's a huge job. It's a super important job. And like I said, it pays really well, but it's very risky. The Byford Dolphin ended up shutting down in 2005. I'm not exactly sure what reason. Maybe it was just old or something like that. But yeah, so basically this horrible accident was the only thing that happened on this rig in general. But I really just wanted to get on here and talk about it because it's really interesting. And before I go, I'm going to give you a recommendation. A YouTuber that has actually inspired me to make this channel is Wendigoon. He does fantastic breakdowns of these kind of things. way better than I ever could. Obviously, I'm new to this, but in general, he is just fantastic. So I will link his Byford Dolphin video in the description. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I will be back probably in the next couple of days, maybe a week. It does take a little bit of time for me to research this stuff and also just get the gumption to get on here and actually record it. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you want to do any research on the Byford Dolphin or you have anything to add that I didn't cover, put it in the comments. And thanks, guys. Let's see you back next time. Peace.